Hello everybody, welcome to the United Stand. Yet another day and another big story. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has spoken about his time at Manchester United, and I tell you what, it's typical. I mean, look, I don't think Solskjaer is the saviour, and I also don't think he's the villain. I think he's somewhere in between, and unfortunately in modern society people can't deal with amber. It's always green or red. Somebody's a legend or they're a villain, and ultimately I think some of what Solskjaer says is good, but he's also deflecting more danger than Captain America's shield. I mean, he's you know, what's happened to Ollie? I presume his non-disclosure order, having been sacked and paid off by United, has now expired, and he's just done this interview to, you know, enhance himself, because he wouldn't have done it 6 months ago. So you've got to see it for what it is. What I see is Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is like a rabbit in the headlights. He wasn't good enough for this job. He wasn't strong enough for this job. But some of the things he's said actually happened at this club, and it's absolutely disgraceful. And it's just another example of what a mess the club is. Because we've had it with Van Gaal, we've had it with Mourinho, and we've had it with Rangnick, and now we've had it with Solskjaer. And Solskjaer was the one who just smiled, you know, and got on the phone to Karaki and never said anything. And now, the last four managers of Man United have come out and said what a shit show it is in there. And, you know, you can keep saying it and saying it. I think sometimes we think it's, you know, we're overhyping it a bit, but it's a fact. I mean, some of the stuff he's come out with, and I wish he'd look, I'm gonna go in on Solskjaer and stuff, and I'm gonna applaud him on stuff, because ultimately that's what life is. Some people are good, some people are bad, some people are in between, and I think Solskjaer is a legend of the club as a player, but he is not a legend of the club as a manager, in my opinion. I think he set us back 3 years. I think it's going to take 3 years to put it right. Just because he's a likeable guy, and we all want to like him, that was the problem with Solskjaer. People still think we miss him. He was a terrible coach, and he presided over an absolute mess that Ten Hag is still dealing with. I mean, Solskjaer's basically come out and said, I don't want to name names, but that effectively that some players wouldn't take on the captaincy when I asked them to. They turned it down. Some of them weren't as good as they think. Some weren't constructive to the environment when they weren't picked. Some of them wouldn't train or play to force a way out. Agents and family members got in their heads and would tell them they were better than they were. It's a disease of modern football. I agree with all of that. I agree with all of that, apart from two things. First of all, name the players, because all I see now is the same old crap. Oh, it must have been Lukaku. It must have been Pogba. It must be Martial. It must have been De Gea. It must have been Sancho. Oh, it must have been Lingard. Oh, it could have been Rojo. I wonder if it was Maguire. Well, it clearly wasn't Maguire because he took the captaincy on, but this is what I mean. The names get thrown around. Now, Solskjaer probably won't name the names in fear of getting sued or something like that, but I'd rather, in that situation, we're at a halfway house, aren't we? Name the bloody names of the players that wouldn't take the captaincy. You were there. You were there. If they said no, you're on firm ground. Say it. Tell us who it was, because ultimately, what does it matter anyway? There's a lot of players that are toxic in that football club. But the second thing I would say is, Solskjaer's the manager. You know, all this is a sympathy vote to try and get a job elsewhere and make the fans, you know, think he did a good job as a manager, and he didn't. At the end of the day, if I'm the manager of the football club and I've got players, I mean, he's telling us the story that players were saying to him they didn't want to play and they didn't want to train because they were forcing a move. You're the bloody manager, mate. That should have been coming out then, not now, not 2 years later when there's another manager trying to do the job that you failed at. How fair is that to be releasing that 2 years later, because you can do now, because the non-disclosure area is over? Like, you should have been saying it at the time. And if you couldn't say it at the time, you should have been putting them into the training with the kids. So we know there's a problem. Why is this stuff coming out now? And why are you not naming the players? Because it's bloody disgusting, mate. You know, if you've got players that refuse to be the captain, you've got players that are saying to you that they don't want to play and they don't want to train because they want to force a move. You've got players that are not constructive, they're negative, and they're causing issues in the dressing room. Why? You were the manager at the time. Like, if this was some tea lady or tea man or tea them telling us about it, then fine. But he was the manager of the club, so just keep that in your mind. It's great what Ollie's revealing, and it's not a surprise, but he was the manager. So by revealing all this, he's undermining himself, because, you know, at least Ten Hag is trying to deal with this. The Sancho issue that's going on, the Ronaldo issue, at least he's trying to deal with it. Solskjaer was there in charge, and people were saying no to his face. about training, about playing, about being the captaincy, and being negative. It just shows. I always felt Solskjaer was too nice for that job. And that's a compliment. He was too nice for that job, because I'm telling you now, if I was in charge, or many of you were in charge, I wouldn't have put up with that. I would not have put up with it. I would have rather walked. I'd have rather got the sack. I would have rather had a big, massive blowout and walk out of that club. But to stay there, I mean, I feel sorry for Solskjaer, because ultimately, he obviously knew for a long time he had players that couldn't be asked, didn't want to be there, that were negative, toxic. And he stayed for another year and basically went through all that shit and ended up getting sacked. I mean, he needed to stand up for himself. That's what he needed to do. But bringing it back to the club, I mean, and look as well, Solskjaer, he wasn't a good coach. He wasn't a good coach. That's the bottom line. I mean, he even says we chased Sancho for 2 years because we wanted him as a right winger. And then he goes on to say, but he wants to play on the left wing. I mean, that's appalling. That's absolutely appalling. So you were looking for a player to play on the right wing, and then you bought him and realised he wants to play on the left wing. Again, strong management. I bought you to play on the right. Play on the fucking right. Is he one of the players that was saying in training, I'm not going to train? I don't know. But you're playing on the right, mate. I've spent 12 months trying to buy you. 2 summers. 75 million quid. 300 grand a week. You're playing on the right wing, mate. That's where you're playing. Oh no, I think he wants to play on the left. I mean, this is what I mean. The club, and he goes on to talk about signings, how he wanted Bellingham, how he wanted Haaland. We've heard this all before. I don't disbelieve Solskjaer on that. Rangnick wanted Enzo Fernandez, Alvarez, Vardiel, Nkunku, Lema. He had a really good list of players. We never bought them. We've got Ten Hag that wanted Kim Min-jae, Gakpo, De Jong, Felix, never got them. He wanted Timber ahead of Martinez. So United, Van Gaal said this, you end up with 6th or 7th choices at Manchester United. It's a mess in that sense, of course it is. But I think the most definitive line for me, well, there's 2 things that Solskjaer said. The first one was that Rangnick inherited a toxic environment. He was asked about Rangnick and he said, I spoke to him when he took the job, and I said, effectively, this club in November is not the same as it was in September 2 months ago. Basically said that it was a toxic environment and that Rangnick was screwed from the day he took the job. The interesting thing about Rangnick is I've seen and tweeted myself some of the stuff that Rangnick said in the time he was here. But even Solskjaer admits he was basically being given a job where he was going to be absolutely slaughtered. Like, the club was in a toxic mess when Rangnick took over it. And nobody was going to change that around. I think it's disgusting what Murtough did. He brought him in to be a guy that was going to work, above the manager, and basically threw him under the bus because he couldn't manage a team that was toxic out of trouble. But look, Rangnick was... People have got blood on their hands when it comes to Rangnick, and it's not just the Glazers, Richard Arnold and Murtough. I mean, everything Rangnick said 18 months ago is true today. We actually had a guy in the club under our employment who knew what needed to be done, and we threw him under the bus. And the press have got a lot to do with that as well. He was ridiculed. So many Man United journalists ridiculed Ralph Rangnick because they don't have the intelligence in relation to what a football club needs to be done to make it better. They judged Rangnick on performance and football games when actually his job was to build the club from the bottom to the top. And we lost somebody there. I'm not saying the press caused it, but they ridiculed him. Every press conference Ralph Rangnick game was an education in relation to the problems of this club. The fans, in their majority, took it on board, but the press couldn't stand him, they ridiculed him, and the club threw him under the bus. And how embarrassing is that we actually had a guy who had the blueprint here, and we got rid of him. And people lie that Ten Hag got rid of Rangnick. Rangnick was gone in mid-March. He did interviews in early March and mid-March that basically threw Murtough, Arnold and the Glazers under the bus. He was gone then. Ten Hag didn't even get the job until mid to late April. So saying Ten Hag didn't want Rangnick, he was already gone. It wasn't Ten Hag that got rid of him. And I guarantee you Ten Hag would love to work under Rangnick compared to what he's worked under in the last year. The second thing I will say from Solskjaer, and I'll applaud him on this, and as I say, there's so much what Solskjaer said. Watch the morning show with Faz, but, I had to do a video because I think some of what he said is ridiculous. Some of what he said is really good. But Solskjaer will be a legend again. He was a crap manager. He's a legend as a player. Like, some of the mistakes he made as a manager we're still paying for now. And he was a weak manager because he allowed all this toxicity. I mean, if I say to somebody, I want you as my captain of Man United, and they say no, and then I say to somebody else, I want you as my captain of Man United, and they say no, I don't just keep going down the list. I'm talking to the guy and I'm saying, why don't you want to be the captain? Well, fuck off then. You know, seriously. I want you in the team on Saturday. No, I'm trying to get a move out. I just don't. Oh, your attitude's really bad. Just deal with the problems. But the one thing that Solskjaer did say about the problems that absolutely resonates, and everybody needs to wake up to this across football. There are fans out there, young fans, old fans, who think that footballers care about your football club the same way you do, and they don't. Even the player that's been at the club since they were like 8 years of age, they don't care about the club the same way you do. They're multi-millionaires living in a bubble, surrounded by people who create them as a brand. We are the life of this football club. They are pawns in a game of chess, and they get paid very, very well. And there's only a few of them that probably even support the club. The vast majority don't. So when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, as an ex-manager of Manchester United, says agents and family members get into the heads of the players and tell them they're better than they are and create this disease of modern football, I can't believe people don't realise this. Like, we've got players now who have this going on. I mean, I don't want to name... Well, I'm not going to be Solskjaer. Sancho's been ill-advised. You know, when Ten Hag says, I didn't play him because he didn't train well, has Sancho wrote that statement within half an hour himself, or has somebody helped him with it? So whoever's got Sancho around Sancho has been ill-advised. And this is what Solskjaer's talking about. And he's absolutely correct. The modern footballer is a brand in themselves, surrounded by agents, family members, friends who basically kiss their arse 24/7, telling them how great they are, because it's not about the collective, it's about the individual. And that creates the toxicity that we suffer with the most. Now, I'm not saying that there's not Man City players that have that. I'm not saying that there's not Arsenal players that have that. But at Arsenal and Man City, for some reason, there's a discipline that the people that... I mean, imagine Jack Grealish has got family members, friends, agents telling him how great he is. He walks into Man City and says, I'm great. Pep Guardiola says, see you later. And that's the problem at Man United. It's not the problem that these players have got these people around them. It's the fact that they've got power to use what those people are saying. And that's what goes on at United. Players can walk in, down tools, get moody, refuse this, refuse that. And it's ridiculous. And look, I know of footballers who've got, you know, agents who are their family members. It's just, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. But it's not really to do with them being family members. I also know agents who will do anything for their player because they're desperate to keep them and they don't want to lose them to another agency. It's just all contributes to a disease, like Solskjaer says. These footballers, if I was a modern footballer, I'd surround myself with people like you. I'd surround myself with people like me who just say it how it is and would say to them, look, you know, you're not the greatest player that's ever lived. You're not something special. You do something wrong, you could end up like Mason Greenwood, completely gone. And he was talented. Like, your career can be over in a minute. So all these people around you tell you you're untouchable and you're great and you're fantastic and you should do this, that and the other. Why are they doing it? Because they want to make money off you. Whether they're family members or agents, they want to make money off you. That's what they do. They're not really helping you out. If I was having a word with Jadon Sancho, I'd say, look, mate, ultimately, whatever your future is, whether it's Man United, whether it's Spurs, whatever, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing. We can't take back that statement, but you need to go into United, you need to apologise to Ten Hag, apologise to the club. I'd even do a public statement to the fans and say, look, I'm passionate, I care, I want to play, I have been through a difficult 12 months, I felt I'd come through it, I wasn't in the team, I saw what the manager said, I completely overreacted, it was wrong, but I want to play football and that's where it's coming from. And then I would surround myself with people that are going to tell you every single day what a fortunate position you're in. You know, you are a talented player, but you've got to work for it. You've got to respect it. And I don't think enough players have that going on around them. I think they've got people around them saying, you're great, we can get you this deal, we can get you that deal. You should be in the team. Why aren't you in the team? Go and have a word with the manager about why you're not in the team. And it is a disease of modern football. And then these footballers surround themselves with the wrong people. And it creates these monsters who are toxic and self-entitled And United seem to have done a very good job at collecting those types of players. But also, it's because we're run badly as well. We don't actually come down hard on them, because you know what? If I'm the director of football at Man United, or I'm the CEO at United, and I've got a player saying I'm not going to play, or why is he playing, or why is he playing, I'm saying, right, you're out. You're out. What do you mean you're out? Man United's a great place to play. You've fed off this club for a long time. The brand, you know, your Twitter goes up massively just because you play for us. You're out. Go and play for Everton and see how you like it. You're out. And I tell you what, you're not only out, I'm going to make sure every top 6 club in this country and every top club in Europe knows what an arsehole you are and what an arsehole the people are around you. I'm going to make sure everybody knows what you've been like, because I tell you what, you've blown it. Get out. And let's see if their attitude changes, because that's probably what happens at Arsenal and Man City. But Man United, we embrace it. We embrace the toxicity. Right, I've had enough. I had to get that out. Thanks everyone for watching. Make sure you smash a like on the video. And of course, get your comments in below, because for me, as I said, love Solskjaer as a player. Never going to forget that. As a coach, I think he was as responsible as anybody for everything that went wrong. And it's sad to see that interview and see how out of his depth he was. How sad. I mean, he described it as a sin that players weren't willing to sit on the bench and work hard. You know, he described the disease of the modern footballer. He described people that weren't trying, you know, that were actively making a negative environment within the dressing room. But his job was to deal with that, and he just wasn't able to do that. And I think also it's quite telling that I think Solskjaer just wanted to do the job for 6 months, put smiles on people's faces and go. And he ended up staying too long, and it damaged him and it damaged the club. Get your comments in below. Smash a like. Speak to you in a bit.